Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Buck Rizvi. Buck Rizvi slogged it out at a corporate job for 21 years before launching his successful online business in 2005 and finally escaping the rat race. He's an expert at bootstrapping, automating, and scaling profitable online businesses while keeping overheads low. His latest venture, an online land business launched during the middle of the pandemic, has since blossomed to seven figures with a virtual staff of only three. Buck lives with his family in a rural Rocky Mountain community where he's a volunteer fireman and works from a home office that's often above the clouds. Buck, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I'm just excited, super excited to be here. I am above the clouds right now. It is snowing and the ceiling has come down on us. We're at about 7,500 feet here in the Roosevelt
Wow.
National Forest. Really cool stuff.
Wow. That
Yeah,
sounds absolutely gorgeous. I just imagining what it must be like to see that view every day while you're working. I'm sure it's a fantastic motivation, a little bit of inspiration as well. So, thank you so much for joining us, Buck. I had the opportunity to meet you several times
I
and
know.
at different events, and I just have loved every minute of getting to hear what you're doing, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. So let's jump right in. How did you get started in doing land deals?
Yeah, you and I touched on this a little bit when we were together live, and I really that's one of my secret ingredients, if you will, to success is the live meetups. So we can get into that later. And it was a live meetup that got me into the land business. I was meeting with a friend. I'm an instrument rated pilot, and I happened to be visiting my friend at the Boulder Municipal Airport. And we were rubbing on his airplane. He's got a twin engine Cessna, and he's a mentor of mine. And a friend of his came by and I was introduced to. And I'd never met him before. His name is Ken. And he mentioned that, oh, I'm in the land business and I run this land business from my home in France. When I live most of the year he spends in parts of France. And it just blew my mind when he described that. He said, I run a virtual land business from overseas. And he introduced me to a couple of land coaches. I won't get into specific names right now, but he introduced me to a couple of things that he was familiar with. And it started me on the journey. I read a book on the subject. I signed up for some coaching. Next thing, I'm proving out the model to myself and doing my own land deals as a result of training and coaching that I received. So that was back in, it's not been very long now. It's been about 4 years. So that was 2020, early 2020 that I
Wow,
started my
that's
journey in the
incredible.
land space.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
remarkable how a chance encounter at a live event and or a live meetup in
A
an
meetup.
airport can
Yeah.
completely change the trajectory of your life. That's remarkable. Before we dive into what those first few land deals looked like for you, let's talk a little bit about your background because it's fascinating to read about your e-commerce businesses. So can you tell us a little bit about what your e-commerce background looks like?
Yeah, man, I was working in a technology corporate job for a long time, and I always knew I wanted to do something, have my own thing going on. And I had made many attempts at that, including consulting, software consulting back a long time ago, before really when the internet started. And then I got this idea, oh, I could make my own product and sell it online. And this was about the time that Google AdWords came online. So my wife and I started to make soy wax candles at home, had our own little factory going, natural soy wax candles. We had some very popular scents. They were selling successfully through pay-per-click ads on Google. And that was great until it wasn't. My wife got pregnant with my youngest son, and suddenly the factory went down. When you have orders coming in, but no production, there's a problem.
Right,
And
right.
so that was my first lesson that if you have an e-com business, you need to make sure that you can make get the things manufactured, get them be able to scale up if necessary, and not necessarily have your wife doing it in the kitchen.
Sounds like a very valuable lesson, nonetheless.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So, what was it about the land business when you heard, when Ken mentioned this and you started doing some research about this? What was it that attracted you to land specifically?
there were several things that one was inventory for me is that if I didn't have to make it, like it was ready to go, then that was very attractive to me, number one. If I could do lead generation and scale the lead generation in a way that I understood, and I did understand about both online marketing and direct mail based marketing, and I had experience with that in previous life. That was familiar and interesting to me. And if I could do this virtually, like from anywhere, that's very important because I've been doing a work from home since 2006 for a long time.
Right.
And I didn't want to have a situation where I needed an office, I need to go in, and need to have a staff that I'm managing physically, that sort of thing. And it ticked all the boxes for me. I also have, I also don't mind talking to people. And I think that is one aspect of this business. You and I are talking, we met at an event, and sort of a willingness to talk to people and be curious and interested in people, I think is an important, that's an attribute I feel I had, and I could use that to be successful in this business.
Excellent. And so you
Yeah.
mentioned that you went through you had a mentor, you went through some coaching programs, did some research, read some books. So what was that learning journey like, that learning curve for you before you actually got that very first deal?
Yeah. The one experience that I had, it was a longer track program. You can go and buy, I would call it a self-directed course and learn the steps, the recipe, if you will. And that's fine. The data's there. You can probably get a book on the internet now and just follow the steps and it'll work. I think being led by the hand in a cohort and taken through those steps with other people that are alongside you has a lot of value. And I highly recommend that if you're interested in doing something like this, is have others with you. And that was important for me. The other thing was expectation setting, that you would achieve certain milestones by certain timeframes. And for example, whether it's getting your letters in the mail, or that you would, in my case, we were asked to acquire a property wholesale and prepare to sell it and sell it. That activity of seeing the whole experience from, I hate to use that term, cradle to grave, the full
Yeah. Yeah.
cycle, let's say just full cycle
There you
of
go.
acquisition to disposition was very valuable. Because then, I was I just got off the phone with a coaching client, and he's closing on a transaction, and he's going to make a nice multi five-figure deal on a profit on that transaction. And I said, you know what? When that wire, he said the wire's going to hit the bank tomorrow. I said, when that wire hits the bank, call me because I want to celebrate that with you. But that makes it real for you when you see the full cycle. And then once you have that happen, you're done. That's it. There's no going back.
You are
You're
hooked.
hooked.
Yeah.
So I think
Absolutely.
I credit the training or that kind of educational experience to take me through the arc and the full cycle of impregnating me on saying, hey, I'm committed now.
Right. Yeah,
I
that's
can
it.
definitely
That's
do
it.
this.
That's really great. I love that you use the analogy of the recipe because there are so many different formats and styles of learning. Different people learn in different ways. But I think I had a similar experience when I was very first dipping my toes into the real estate world. I was wholesaling houses and I'd read all these books and looked at all the recipes and everything, but there's nothing quite being in the kitchen with the chef that wrote that recipe that can
Yeah.
say, okay, now do this and let me watch you do that. So definitely right there with you. Talk to us a little bit about what your very first deal was like, because that's that proof of concept that we just talked about that's so important
Yeah.
to every real estate investor, that very first deal. So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. I was obviously very nervous because this was a response to a letter that I had sent. And it was my first time getting on the phone in the context of a land deal. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Let me just
Right.
be very transparent. And I had the questions that I knew I wanted to go through. I did them as a bullets. It wasn't like I was going to read them word for word, but I had an idea of what I was going to say and in the basic order. Turns out she was probably not quite my parents' age, as older, elderly woman. She was very sweet to me, easy to talk to. So that's, oh, thank God. Uh, she's not going to rake me over the coals or anything. In this case, it was a blind offer. So I had made the actual offer on the property. She knew it wasn't a neutral or a range offer or something like that where I had negotiation to do. So that was nice aspect of it. And she answered my questions, I said, the next step is she had, I said, you just signed the purchase agreement that I sent you, which is a simple one pager, and you can scan that and send that back, and we'll get the process started. She said, okay. She did, like the next day. And I'm scrambling to figure out, okay, how do you record a deed and how am I going to handle this? In this case, it was going to be a self-close. So I had a few steps to go through. I wasn't closing through title on this one. It was a kind of a relatively inexpensive, around $2,000 acquisition. But
Okay.
at the time when you're just starting, 2,000 sounds like a lot. I'm
Absolutely.
not
Because
sure if it's going to work. I
I
got to
mean,
sell it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I would say that was the good news about that was blind offer, easy to deal with seller, not angry, easy conversation. I was speaking with them again, the willingness to get on the phone and have a conversation. I do see, we can get into this later. I do see a lot of land investors now, especially younger ones, would avoid picking up the phone. So they want to text, they want to email, they want to, or push it to a VA or something like that. And that may not serve them well in the early going of getting the business standing it up and really understanding it from all dimensions. And so that's another reason why I think why I've been successful is a willingness to talk to people, listen to them, feel like I'm resonating with them, hear what their hopes, dreams, concerns are,
Definitely. Yeah.
both on
Yeah.
the acquisition and on the sales side.
For sure. And I think when you're on the phone, you can hear tone, you can hear cadence of speech, you can hear a lot of things that you can't get from a text message or an email response or something like that. So I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of valuable information just from those context clues when you're speaking to sellers and buyers on the phone.
exactly.
So Buck, you mentioned it was a $2,000, was it buy for 2,000 and then you sold
Yeah.
for, or how much did you sell for?
For that one, it was 6K. I think I did that one on a terms. So I carry a lot of notes as part of my business. And now I'm doing more. It's probably two thirds, one third, two-thirds owner financed, one third cash that I'm doing. I'm starting to favor cash deals and larger transactions now. So the business has definitely evolved in the last 4 years, working more with agents to
Mm,
sell more expensive properties. I would say the caliber of the properties that I'm focused on now is higher quality properties. I would call it Class A in space if you're thinking about
yeah,
commercial real estate. But yeah, it'd be Class A properties that have a higher desirability, better areas, that sort of thing. I do a mix of flat rate MLS and listing directly with agents.
excellent. And so talk to us a little bit more about what your bread and butter type deals are now. You mentioned these Class A properties. How are you structuring them? Are you still doing closing on these properties and doing the traditional flip for those cash deals? Are you assigning? Are you double closing? What do those deal structures look like?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by people that are doing the double closing and the assignments. I have to say, just because I'm used to taking possession, that I'm generally acquiring. And oftentimes it's through partners. If it's not my own capital, it'll be partner capital on the acquisition front. I would like to experiment and do more of the double close type of transaction. I have nothing against that. It's something that I'm considering. It's just that I haven't had the need to yet. So we'll see how that goes. I would say the property values that I'm targeting are higher, definitely north of 30,000 market price, whereas before I was happy to pick up stuff like that $2,000. Two to 10 was probably where I was averaging on the acquisition side, and double or tripling my money on the disposition side.
Very good.
Uh,
Now you got all day.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I think you mentioned in my bio, I have a small team, but I have a team. And so I have virtual assistants. I have a sales person slash transaction coordinator. I'm I'm serving as the acquisitions person now because I like to talk to sellers, although I have had an acquisitions manager in the past. I'm thinking about bringing one on again. That's
Excellent.
one aspect of it. I also, I don't know, everyone's talking about doing bigger deals and subdivides and things like that. So I have a few, I would say, long-term project, multi-year type deal opportunities I'm working on as well. My plan is to do maybe a couple of those, one or two of those a year,
Great.
more
Yeah.
as an experiment. It could be very
Sure.
profitable, but
Sure.
I'm not going to bet the farm on it. And I'm going to continue running the business on the bread and butter stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We hear a lot of talk about we hear a lot of people say in the land industry, oh, a big deal is the same exact thing as a smaller deal. All you got to
Mm.
do is add a couple zeros and that kind of thing. But it's a different type of owner who owns those larger acreage properties, right? There's a different
Yes.
psychology, there's a different process, there's a different approach to marketing for those types of properties. It's not as simple as like just flipping a switch. Yeah, I definitely get you where you're coming from when you're talking about
You
experimenting with.
have to take your time on those and you have to feel and just say, hey, this is going to be a slow crock pot type of deal. And I got to be happy with that. And I'm not going to create any stress for me or the seller. And it's
That's
going to be,
really
hey,
great.
if we want to get it done, we'll get it done.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And again, it comes back to those expectations that you talked about earlier, like just making sure that you have the right expectations for how this deal is actually going to go down. Yes, it's
Yeah,
great to get a six-figure payday. Expect maybe 11 months, maybe 18
right.
months. Can
Sure.
you float all of your expenses until then, right?
Right.
If that's the only thing that you're betting on. So definitely get that.
That's a good point you're making about the, floating expenses. I think one other dimension of your people's journey in doing land is developing the network, the Rolodex, if you want to use an old-fashioned term, and growing those connections, whether it's finance partners, whether it's somebody that can help you with the details of entitlement and doing the subdivide, or any other aspect of the business, and building those connections, those relationships, proving yourself. Even though you don't know the answers, you can handle things capably and find the people that have the answers, and that builds a trust network. And I feel like I've enjoyed doing that. I'm continuing to do that. I think it's an important thing. And I took some notes here of what we would be talking about. Is, to me, the network is everything. If we didn't have the network, it'd be very lonely. You and I wouldn't be
Absolutely.
talking.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Right.
and I think that's a fantastic point. Coming from the house wholesale background, that's what my background was in before I actually got into land. That was a super lonely kind of venture because for
Mhm.
some reason in the single family space, at least my experience was there wasn't a whole lot of collaborative spirit there. Because I think
Mhm.
that you can easily do a single family home by yourself, right? You don't really need a whole lot of teams unless you're doing something that's like high volume and you're building big portfolios and things like that. Flipping, maybe you might need some construction teams. But for the most part, you can pretty much take down a single family home by yourself.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got into the land space, which I realize now it's a lot more, it's very similar to the commercial space
Mhm.
where everything is really team oriented. And so just having teams of capital partners and things like that to take down these larger deals or even just to fund like the regular flips because we're not able to get bank lending as easily on a vacant lot as we could on single family homes.
So
So you really
being
do
more
need
creative forces. No,
yeah,
that's good. I
absolutely.
like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I definitely agree with that collaborative networking approach. There are some remarkable people in this industry and just so generous with everything. And I'm very grateful to be part of this community. Speaking of community, speaking of networking and things like
Yeah.
that, you mentioned capital partners. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about how you go about raising private money?
Looking back at how do you create something that's repeatable for people, I think there's some components that can be repeated. There's some components that are more experience based. Yeah, I can't control my age and experience, right? It's just I am what I am and where I was when I got into this. Okay. So you start where you are. That's why everybody starts where they are. So that's one component. I think me having transactional experience before I went to a potential funding partner was important. So I funded my own deals initially and was able to prove the model. I could demonstrate that. I experimented with a couple of funding partners who presented themselves in different groups, Facebook groups. You have a Facebook group, or the community I came in had their own Facebook group. And those guys are typically trolling.
Right.
Guys and gals are trolling for operators, they call them, to invest
Right.
in their land deals. And there's plenty of them. There's more money than you can shake a stick at for good operators and good deals. And so I tried a couple. I was seeing how does this work? I was experimenting. I feel like I can present myself, I can talk to people, I can say this is my process. Here's the nature of the deal. And of course, they're going to look at the underwriting of the deal as well. And no good deal is going to be going to go by the wayside. So I did a couple of transactions with funding partners, and then I found a couple that, oh, I really, my attitude is I like to do business with people that I like to do business with. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Total sense. Total
I've done
sense.
enough things where I did things because I felt like I had to, or the terms were great, but I didn't really like the person or whatever it was. So if there was something that was off to me, or today, this is my attitude, if there's something off to me, I'm just going to go get the money elsewhere. I don't feel like I have to do the deal with this person. And it may not just be the term. The terms might have been okay, but maybe just the interaction with the person wasn't great. And so I've found some people that I like chatting with, I like doing business with. It's easy to do transactions with them if I need funding. And I want to increase that corral of folks that I'm working with. So I feel like I can, whether it's a small deal or now getting into these now literally multi seven figure type subdivide transactions, that I can get the funding for these.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. That
And
is
I would
so
encourage everyone to do the same. They start small, do one if you don't need it. And I'm
mm,
I'm a big believer in investing in the relationship. What if the deal's it's not the best terms, but you really feel like this person could be the one that you could do work with again and again? Well, you might take terms that aren't so great, but you're doing it for other reasons.
absolutely. Oh, that's so good. That is so good.
Yeah,
So, Buck, I asked this to a lot of people. I'm curious to hear what your perspective of this is, but where do you see the market going now? And what have you done to pivot and to address these market changes so that way you can continue to thrive in your business?
that's a great question. I have made a shift as the interest rates rocketed, and decided, okay, I need to make sure that every property that I'm acquiring needs to be, we call them A plus properties. Could be rural recreational, could be waterfront, water view, places where people want to go, could see themselves having their vacation or forever home there, independent of where interest rates and the economy is. So I don't want to be stuck holding something that, yeah, back a couple years ago, you could sell umbrellas in the rain, right?
Mhm.
Now, not
Mhm.
so
Yep.
much. And so that's something that I'm focused on. Even infill lots, which some people I think will poo infill lots, depending who you talk to. In certain highly desirable markets, I'm still successful at selling, and there are developers that are still looking to acquire lots that
Yep.
are shovel ready effectively. They're in a nice neighborhood, and utilities are available. So I just had a couple of those go into title recently, and I'm like, man, I want more of those.
Yeah, yeah. There's a
So,
lot less like due diligence that has to be done because yeah, they're in the middle of a subdivision. Like it's
right,
already been developed. There's a lot less variables there that could kill the deal than if you're just talking about maybe a rural piece of property.
exactly. I know
Yeah.
some people say, oh, go do rural rec. And then everyone's like rushing over to do rural rec. And then they'll say, oh, but infill lots are still working. Okay. And then they're rushing over to back to do the infill lots. And oh, we need to do big subdivide. That's what we should be. In a sense, they all work.
They
Uh,
do. They all work.
yeah.
Yes.
And so it might be good to start with something that's repeatable for you, and then you can start adding to your stack. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm definitely not a big, subdivide guy. I'm learning. And so I know that's going to take time. I need friends. I need financing. I need good luck in some cases, those kinds of things. And I would say patience is key in this market right now. Deals are still happening. Definitely on the acquisition side, I think the ability to acquire and acquire smart is my lead flow is substantial right now. I feel like I have more leads than I can handle at the moment.
Excellent.
Um, so I know that's a good problem to have. I don't want to take that for granted. Yeah,
Definitely.
we were just talking. I was just talking to a coaching client about there's a book, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. You
Yeah,
probably heard of it, right?
absolutely.
Like, where am I going to focus my energy? What is the thing that I'm going to be doing today, this week, this month? Do I have an executive assistant to help me stay efficient and focused?
Yep. Exactly. All the things,
The
right?
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And for me,
fantastic.
it's which deals. Like today, who should I talk to if I'm going to get on the phone? Because usually my value of time invested for phone calls is very high. I know I'm good at it.
Mm.
So I should be spending time talking to sellers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you mentioned these A plus deals. Let's dig into that a little bit further. How do you go about picking a market when you're looking to start targeting either whether it's a new market or you want to do a little bit of market research? How do you identify potential markets?
Yeah, Kendall, I know I've probably heard all the different variations of the theme. When I started, it was go where everyone else is going,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is, hey, go on LandWatch. If there's other investors, here's what an investor looks like on selling land on LandWatch. If there are a few of those in that market, it's probably an okay market. There's that, and that worked for me. I was able to pick a few markets and do that. Now my tendency is to be more data driven.
Mm.
And so there are some land coaches that kind of more focus on the data. We have tools now that weren't available when I first started, like a priced that you can use the data. And my only concern about using some tools that everyone else is using is that everyone gets the same answer.
Yep.
So you have to watch that. It's like, oh,
Absolutely.
okay, it's the same three counties in Florida.
I'm sure
That's
we could
great.
list
I'm going
them
to
right
drop mail
now.
now.
Yes.
um,
Yes, absolutely.
but I have a good friend who's wildly successful in Florida. All right. So it's not like you
Yep.
cannot be successful just because a lot of other people are there. So that'll definitely work. I try to do zig when everyone else is zagging. So I'll include some of the data filtering and data in like a price.com. I'll bring in data from other sources like a Redfin or a Realtor. They have monthly data that they publish,
Mm.
and I will download that month. It tends to be the single family, and you have that a single family experience. So it tends to be single family data, but I use that as a proxy for kind of what's happening in the market. And it's generally down to the zip code level, so a little finer granularity than county. And I'll also look at some of the bigger picture things like, hey, where are people migrating? Why? Where are people? I know what kind of land I would want. Why would I have? I'm a family man. I've got kids and grandkids. What would I want to do if I had disposable income and wanted to buy real estate? So I apply a little bit of my thinking and the data and a tool, and I'll get it helps me shortlist at least to county level, and then I'll use maybe some of the data from, say, a realtor to take it down to zip codes within counties. So I'm a zip code level person now. Some people do the census tracts, which is a little
Mm.
different way of looking at it. I experimented with that once, but I've been really doing more zip code level focusing. So I'll try to pick the best county, but the best zips within the counties. And now I think you and I talked about this when we were live, leveraging more of things like ChatGPT, leveraging AI to analyze the data from the different sources. So I'll have these different data files. They have common keys if you're into database stuff. So whether it's the APN or mailing address for the owner, and you can join them that way. And you can ask the AI to do some interesting things with the data and maybe bring in data that the AI has access to that's not really part of the priced set or the realtor set, and look at it a little differently. Those are things I try to do so I can winnow down. And the most recent set I did, this was quarterly. I think it was about 30 different counties and then zips within those counties. And I pulled the data. It was about 120,000 records that of owner records. And that would feed the machine for the next quarter.
Hey there, land fans. If you're enjoying this episode and would like to see more episodes like this, please be sure to let us know by liking and subscribing below.
for me.
Wow, that's very cool. So if
Yeah,
someone's listening to this and they've never done AI before, they've never played around with ChatGPT, or maybe they did, they played around with
I know.
ChatGPT to get a few things. Can you walk us through, give us an example of what would a beginner to AI do to be able to at least use ChatGPT in a way to help it analyze data and figure out, okay, this may be a good zip code or a good county to start testing in.
Sure. You could, I like to, AI can help you with this. I like to pick areas that are within, let's say, a driving distance from a FAA has this thing called level 1 and level 2 airports that are large and medium, I guess is the term they use in the FAA for airports. So if you said, hey, what are all the large and medium airports in the United States? Okay, boom, there's the data set. And that's accessible, or you could actually get it. You can Google and say, where is that data? Someone's published it, and they have, and it's free. And so you can grab that, and that would have a lat long in it of the centroid for the airport. You can also ask ChatGPT things like, oh, gee, what are the counties that are within 2-hour drive of these large and medium airports? Okay, there. Oh, those are the counties. Awesome. So you're getting an analyst. I used to have a business analyst that worked for me many years ago. Now you just have a computer that you ask the questions and here are the counties, boss. These are the ones with a 2-hour drive. It'll do the algo to figure out what the drive time is to the nearest counties. You might ask a question like, which of those counties have public lands in them? Have a good number of public lands in them. You're like, okay, here's the short list of the ones that are 2-hour drive, have up public lands. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really a progression of publicly available data, like airport from the government publishes everything. Every airport that's classified large and medium, and the lat long coordinates of that airport is public. And algorithms to figure out drive times and where counties, the centroid of counties is also public in terms of lat long location, et cetera. And then if you wanted to go a step further and say, okay, I only want to focus on states where people are migrating to. What's the net positive migration? Because I'd rather have things where people are going to rather than leaving. That could be another way to look at it. So you could limit your states to those. And then you could bring in the data I mentioned, like realtor.com monthly data. What's in there? It's very similar to what's in priced. With their searching, they have days on market. They have sold or for sale ratios. They have number of properties properties on market at any given time, right? So you can focus on the ones that have more properties than the ones that are like little tiny small opportunities, if you will. So I tend to focus on things where there's more fish in the. I'd rather,
Okay.
even if it's a big pond, I want to make sure there's a lot of fish in there.
Sure.
So I'd
Sure.
rather,
Yeah.
and then a lot of that data is there. It does take, I know everyone wants the big red easy button, because if someone just made that and you could just, again, it's if everyone has price and gets the same answer, it's like everyone has the same weapons and they keep getting
Sure.
the same 3 counties in Florida. I'd rather get slightly different ones. The other thing is, I also don't mind. I remember, and tell me if I'm getting into too much detail on this, but
Never enough
when I
detail. So
all right.
go for it. Dig
When I first
in.
started, I think the first 3 counties, the first 3 markets, I'll just call them, one of them wasn't really, to this day, it wouldn't show up on anyone's list. And that made me realize there's some other things that
Mm,
could be important to look at other than just say it's the county, it's that 1 of 3 counties in Florida.
right.
And I do see people being successful in markets that are non-obvious to most newbie land investors. So I do like to also go outside of some of the normal hunting grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. So can you talk a little bit about how you would get the data from realtor.com, for example,
Mhm.
into ChatGPT so it can interface and then analyze that data?
Yeah, you have to do the paid version. I haven't tried this with a freebie version, the ChatGPT 4 with the ability to upload files. They may call it their data analyst, or there's a name for that feature, but it allows you to select the CSV file and bring it in. And a lot of times ChatGPT is smart enough to read the header row and kind of figure out what the data is. So it'll do
Mm,
its best guess at analyzing it. But you can also seed it and tell it, really, I'm just interested in these columns. This is what they are. I've even gone so far as to take, if you go into chat into priced, they describe a lot of what these columns mean, the meaning
mm,
of some of the data like days on market or sold to for sale ratio or what have you. And so you can feed that, oh, this column means this is, or this ratio. And I would ask the AI to act as if it's an expert in real estate analysis,
mm,
big data analysis on real estate. And I want you to inform me as to what would be the best stack rank these counties or stack rank these zip codes within the county based on these parameters. And so I do a lot of that. And it is incremental. There's not, you just load it up and it's once and then you just get the answer. I know I'm iterating and seeing the result, and I'm iterating again. Sometimes the answers are not what I hope, or I made a mistake. So you have to be curious and willing to spend some time with it. And then once you figure out the recipe, ChatGPT does let you save your recipe as a GPT. You can actually save your app and you can keep that private to you. And I've done that. I have a bunch of apps that I keep for myself that I rerun or I have my team run.
that's awesome. And
Yeah.
so, how do you get the data? I get that you can pull the data like by downloading a CSV file from Price, for example, but is it the same process for Realtor.com
Yeah.
or Redfin?
I would just say realtor space data space download, and you will find the current month's realtor. Yeah, I'm just doing it now. These sponsored links. Yeah, the first non-sponsored link takes you to what's called a residential data library for realtor. And I use the monthly inventory,
Okay.
and you'll see county and zip options for the current month. And those are big CSV files that there's a bunch of description. Actually, this is the data dictionary, which is what each column means, is right there on that page.
Wow,
So
that's cool.
you could actually feed those descriptions into ChatGPT and say, this is what this is. This is what this is. And ask it to look at specific columns and use that in its selection criteria.
Love
Uh,
it.
yeah, and
Awesome.
and that's updated. That's updated monthly. I really, and you have yeah, they have other data, market hotness and other things, but I tend to gravitate to the monthly inventory. Like I said, it is single family residence. You can, I think there are a couple of other apps out there that are being built by land coaches. I haven't tried them all. I like to roll my own.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's customizable, so you can
Yeah.
get exactly what you want. That makes a lot of
If you're not comfortable doing this yourself, you could hire somebody on Fiverr that has a little bit more of a bent for doing this, or hire your niece or nephew that's more of a
right.
digital native that
Right.
would play around with this kind of stuff. I would say it does. You do need to check the data. You do need to verify that what it did, what gave you was what you expected,
That's a really good
before
point.
you start pulling files and spending money. In some cases, you have to spend money to get the owner records. Yeah.
So, going in the direction of the owner records now, what type of criteria do you like to look for to do deals? So you did mention that there's a 30K plus market value.
Yes.
What other criteria do you like to pull whenever you are pulling lists for owner records?
I generally will price the information if I can. Either I can get the direct data from Priced and they'll give me the best estimate on the pricing, or I will use my own factor against the assessed value, or which I've done that successfully, or I will use the estimated market value. In some cases, you can get that data from whoever you're licensing it from. I guess I'm a little bit of a cheapskate. I'm trying to find ways that I can calculate this without having to do it line by line and not have to spend an extra 3 to 10 cents per
Sure.
record to get
Yeah,
that. Because I do want to focus on things are above a certain threshold. I generally uncap it. I'll go after the most expensive stuff too, because you never know. Maybe
yeah,
it's assignable, like you were saying. Maybe there's another property they own that if I can't take this one down, I can take one of their other properties.
definitely. And do
Um,
you have a criteria? Do you have a size range that you go after, or is it just what's your main kind of is the market value, the kind
yeah,
of
that's a great question. Because I've had such good success with smaller infill lots, a good example is I did a just off water lot off the beach,
Mm,
but walking distance to the beach. And it was like 0.1 acres.
hmm.
And I sold it for 90,000. I
Wow.
more than double my money.
Wow.
So, eh, you know,
Yeah.
are
I
you
mean,
going to
there's,
ignore a 0.1 acre lot?
yeah.
That was right. It went on the market and the agent saw the sign immediately, said, I have a buyer for you. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Let's do it. So that taught me, I think that's where you get the experiential, right? Is it taught me, don't turn your nose just because you're going to hear somebody on a podcast say, I want to do 5 acre and up. And that's just the way I roll. I'm like, okay, it's no problem.
Awesome.
5 acres is fine in Missouri, but maybe
Great.
in some of the other areas might consider the smaller lots. So I've had success with infill as well. I won't turn my nose up at it, is I guess all I'm saying. So it depends on what the market is, if
Yeah,
it
that's
makes
really
sense.
good. That's really good. So, can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of your favorite marketing channels? You mentioned that you send mail, you've mentioned blind offers. What does your current marketing methods look like on the acquisition side?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a neutral method person now. I started blind and I was very successful blind offers. So I'm not going to turn my nose up at that. And I know people that are very successful with blind offers.
Mhm.
So it's going to be don't do as I'm doing is because you can be successful with any of them.
It all
Um,
works. Yeah.
yes. I like for me personally, the neutral method opens me up to multiple channels. I generally start with texting now. And I just have a system and a process now that lends itself to texting. It can be, I can manage the rhythm of that. It is generating plenty of leads for me. And I can also add other channels such as ringless voicemail, cold calling, and direct mail if I choose to. And I would say having multiple channels operational is a smart thing to do because you never know when the rug's going to be pulled on you. So rug could be pulled on you for texting. And then the rug will never get pulled with direct mail. So
Right. Right.
having something like on hot standby, even if it's a small campaign or you're just continuing, it's ready to go or whatever it is, just don't freak out because your text or rings voicemail channel disappeared. I know it'd be super stressful if that's all you're dependent upon. My lesson from e-commerce was I had a business with two other partners and I was solely dependent upon Google ads as an
Mhm.
example. And Google decided they didn't want a company like ours to be advertising. We're just selling very high quality supplements, but they just for whatever reason they didn't want us to sell those supplements. And so the campaigns were shut down, and we had a very large business go to zero overnight. We were scrambling because we were dependent upon one. So it'd be like being dependent upon texting now or you know
Sure.
something other than direct mail. My feeling is direct mail. It's been around for over 100 years. It's going to be around for another 100 years. The deliverability is 100%. It is expensive. So you definitely want to have a coach and some examples of creatives to use and making sure you structured it correctly. You can make mistakes and you can waste a lot of money if you're not careful
Definitely.
with
Yeah.
direct mail. Yeah.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I love, though, the idea of using a more affordable marketing channel to
Yeah.
whittle down your list before you get to direct mail.
Right.
So that's a really good point. There's a lot of talk, especially since launch control went down recently, not too long ago, about
Yeah.
about texting and the legalities of texting. It opened up a whole host of questions, but can you
Yes.
talk about what is the number of texts that you send out? What does that look like? What does your cadence look like? Follow-up processes, things like that when it comes to your texting campaigns.
Yeah, Kendall, I do see my texting process as a little bit of my secret sauce. So, but I'll get into some of it from a high level.
Gotcha.
I am seeing, and this may not hold. Well, in general, I'm seeing a pretty high lead generation rate for the number of texts that I'm sending. And this just could be the current market at the moment, although historically I've always been good at lead generation with texting. I'm seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of 1% in terms of raw leads per number of texts sent. One lead out of 100
That's
texts,
good. Good.
which, given the cost of sending a text message compared to a direct mail piece, is pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic.
And that's a lead. That's a raw lead. It's not. I wouldn't say it's fully qualified and all these other things, but it's a raw lead of somebody that is engaged and has sent at some level said, "I'm interested to take the next step."
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And so that gives us a lot of things. It gives us a lot of things to look at. And it's like you're at bat and you get to look at a lot of pitches before you decide which one you're going to swing at. I would like to have a lot more pitches thrown my way before I pick the one
absolutely.
I want.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a volume game, but it's a volume
Yeah.
game, and texting really does allow for that.
It also allows you, so I don't want to, yeah, I have to be careful about saying this. It does allow you to experiment with markets faster, so you get faster answers.
Yeah.
I think it's as important to figure out that this market's a dud as fast as possible and cut your losses. And I've had to do that. And I've had had a nice riverfront property that was landlocked under contract, and there's just no way I could fix the
Mm.
problem, and had to let it go. And there was a bunch of other properties that showed up in that market, and no, this market's just not going to work. And I was able to just redirect to a different market, and you can do that a little much more readily, even in a matter of 24 hours if you want, and keep the costs low. And I think having that progression, proving it with something that's relatively lower cost, and then saying, okay, now it's proven. Now I can make sure I carpet bomb. I hate that, maybe that's the wrong word, but I want to make sure that I really squeeze the juice out of this market, because I'm able to get the low hanging fruit with the people that respond to texts, but I know I'm really going to reach as much as possible by doing direct mail, maybe cold calling. And that's going to maximize my yield from this market.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic advice. Really good. Being super intentional about the strategy of marketing instead of just throwing a bunch of money at it and hoping that something sticks.
Yeah. And I know that's one of the appeals of the land business, is that there's so much profit that you could make a big mistake and still break even or make money. And that's
Right.
like what people, and back a couple of years ago was even more so. So I can, right, the selling umbrellas in the rain. Everyone's successful. You get a car and you get a car and you get a car. And it's,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I'm like,
Absolutely.
okay, it maybe, and I saw this in ecom too, back in the early 2000s, is yeah, when the slaps occurred and Google and Yahoo and others were, and then Facebook did the same thing with taking out brands and not allowing them to advertise easily, that it shook the market up. And so we remained as an e-commerce play, but we saw many others just fall by the wayside, because it was easy to market and sell things on Google with Google ads. And so I think the same thing is repeating itself here in the land space, is that now you really have to be a little bit more buttoned up, a little more resilient. It's not going to be super easy for everybody, right? You just put in a quarter and you get $1 out for everybody. And that's why I think having education, having podcasts like Only Land Fans, making sure that you are buttoned up and you're constantly leveling up your education and enjoying yourself and hanging around the right folk. Yeah, there's plenty of people. I think when you and I were together in Texas, I felt like everybody in that we were together, and the people I love hanging out with and I enjoy. And some of the coaches were there, right? You were
Yeah.
there, other coaches were there. I'm like, man, I felt like I was in fantasy land hanging around with these cool guys. I definitely felt like I was in the cool kids club. It was a lot of fun. But everybody can do that. There is a willingness to put yourself out there, go to events, network, and then good things happen. And then you're learning the right methods or right approaches, or learning the mistakes people are making.
Yes, which
You
is
may not
just as
hear it on a
much.
podcast. You're probably going to hear it after hours at one of those events, right?
Yes, absolutely. No, that's fantastic insight, Buck. So let me ask you, what is something, in your opinion, that no one or very few people are talking about in our industry that we should be talking about in the land space right now?
I'm sensitive to things being sold to people as this is the best biz op opportunity of a lifetime, and it's absolutely gonna work, et cetera, et cetera. I will say I've had a lot of experience with different businesses, whether it's coaching, ecom, selling soy wax candles, ecom, supplements, now land. And I would say this is the easiest business to stand up and make large amounts of money quickly. So to time to getting to doing that and having an income that could support you and your family, I definitely feel that opportunity still exists. Is it super easy? Can everyone do it? I don't know. I think I do see some common attributes in the successes, a bit of resilience, a bit of the people that have had experience with things going south and coming back from that. So a little bit of a phoenix rising from the ashes, I think. I do see certain personalities that tend to work well, whether it's a salesperson background, because they have to deal with no's and overcome that and be successful as a salesperson. Um, Engineers, I see them being successful, software, electrical engineers, those kinds of things. I'm not sure why. I come from an engineering background too, but that I see that common thread. I'm a volunteer firefighter, but I also see a bunch, for some reason, firefighters, first responders seem to do well in this business. Probably, I was just talking to I coach one of them, and he was just telling me about it. He had a horrific motorcycle accident he responded to, and having to deal with that scene and deal with the aftermath of that and those kinds of things, and then come back and be a normal dad and husband and run his business and do things. So I think it's perspective
Mm.
too, that look, if I can deal with that, I can call a seller and
Right.
ask them what's what and maybe make an offer and take a no.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that, yeah, maybe you could look inside yourself as someone, whether you're just starting or maybe you have that experience already, and be introspective and say, what are the things that really give me the leverage, whether it's being on a call. When I see you, I think I'm also on accountability calls with other land investors that I admire, that I respect, and we usually get together once a week. So we lift each other up. That's a success component. And then going to the live events, going to continuing your education. Look, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a software developer, whatever, you're a salesperson, you're constantly going to up your game and learn more. You're not going to take one course or one coaching investment and expect that's all you need to do. I don't know. Did I miss the question? I just want to make,
Yeah, it's perfect. No,
of
it's great.
who is it? Is there a perfect avatar for this? Probably, maybe not. But I do think there's a grittiness, and maybe that was a title for this, is the gritty dads, because I'm a dad, is having grittiness and being able to come back from adversity, whatever it is. And it could have been today, could have been yesterday, whatever it is. It just happened. But then your grittiness and willingness to come back with a good attitude, to be curious and caring and considerate. I think those are important attributes to have, not just be in it for, I think the reason I feel I'm successful is I really feel like I set up win transactions for both on the buy side and the sell side. And I have testimonials from from my sellers that have sold me land. I collect those because people love doing business with us. And I like to get to know them and hear their story and understand why. One of my questions is, hey, what are you going to do with the money once you get it? And one lady tell me, I'm going to go move to be near my son so I can be near my son and grandkids. I said, that's great. So that was our conversation as we were going through closing and stuff, is that, hey, getting ready to make the move and go be next to your son and grandkids. So that level, as opposed to thinking, oh, I just hope she says yes and I get this deal and I make the money.
Because this is a people business, right?
Yeah.
It's a people business at the end of the day. And so what I love so much about that is thinking about and being intentional about what is the customer experience on both the buy side and the sell side. It can be so easy to get caught up in like just getting the transaction, what are the numbers of the deal and that kind of thing. But there are people that are attached to all of these things, and we're really solving problems for someone else. And their problem is they're trying to liquidate their property. Find out why,
If
right?
you can get out of your own head and leave that notion of what am I going to get out of this, or I need to get this deal done, or something like that, and more of if the deal happens, that's great. I would love for it to happen. Here's what I can do. How can I help you? Can we make it work? Let's work together and do this if we can, type of thing. It becomes much more cooperative and less stressful for both of you, both of us, right? In that conversation. And I try to do more of that. I'm not perfect, but I always try to go back in that mindset of how can I be of service? And I think maybe that's being a firefighter too has taught me more about that, is being, how can I be of service? How can I think about others? And then being in a situation where if you have been in, situations where it's high stress, high types of environments, but you have to be the calm one, does help
Right.
you put it in perspective.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Buck, let me ask, what would you consider to be your superpower?
I need to spend more time on the phone with people. I think that's probably where I'm best at. I'm both whether it's face to face or on a phone call is fine. I prefer to get people if I can on a Zoom call. I just have one seller I'm talking to where he's about my age, and we enjoy getting on Zoom calls when and suddenly we really like we're doing now. We can really resonate with each other because there's so much more information, right, with the
Yeah,
facial expressions. But I'm good on the phone too, and I enjoy that. My preference is a video call.
that's great. That's great. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, and
And
I
so,
know that's can create. Some people might say, I don't want to talk to people, or I don't want to definitely don't want to get on a video call. And I understand. So finding that, and maybe that's a thing where you partner with somebody that is really good at, that's
right, absolutely. Yeah,
your partner is capable of that.
that's
Like
really good.
I have a daughter who's like super, I won't talk about my kids because I'll get in trouble.
We'll save that for another
That
time.
will be for the after hour
There you
discussion.
go, for the after hours edition. I love it. So, Buck, you mentioned Dan Martell earlier. Do you have any other types of authors or thought leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs that you like to read and follow?
I've been I've been reading a lot of the older works. I feel like the books, I read a really cool book, which was actually a set of interviews with Harry Truman.
Okay.
Harry Truman was a Democratic president,
Yeah.
became president because Roosevelt died, and Harry Truman was infamously the one who dropped the bomb on Japan. And but it was a bunch of interviews with him, and so it's called Plain Talking. I think is a fascinating book, and he's just a salt of the earth guy. Would be worth listening. Actually, I would listen to it on Audible because the Audible rendition, they actually do it in the Missouri dialect. The
Oh,
guy who
that's
reads it.
cool.
Yeah, it
That's
does a
cool.
really interesting read of that. So these are not the books you hear on the business like a Dan Martell, the late thinking. But the one of the things that he mentioned is he read every book in the library. I think his hometown was Independence, Missouri, and he read every book in the library. So 3,000 books by the time before he was 20.
Wow.
Phenomenal, right? Incredible. But he had some favorites, and they were these old classics. So there was a couple books called Plutarch's Lives, and it's
Mm,
like volumes 1 and 2, and it goes through the lives of different Roman and Greek notables and comparing and contrasting them. And so that kind of has led me down this journey of reading some of the ancient works.
very
And I'm definitely into Stoic principles like Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and I'm trying to dive into other Plato's Republic and other things like that. Try to understand because all this information, all these things about how to be, how to act, why people do what they do, human behavior, it's been known for thousands of years.
right.
It's been captured.
Yes. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
As King Solomon said, I think there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. Um, is there a newer, and it's always interesting to then read those and then listening to read some of the newer works and say, hear the echoes of the stuff that
Yeah.
was in the ancient texts. So that's been fun for me, and I've been listening. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. I know you
Yeah,
wanted me to
that's
pull
very
out
cool.
another new book, but Probably some of the old ones.
No.
My daughter she's going to a classical academy for high school right now. It's a charter school, so it's public school, but charter school. And so she's reading some of the classics like Plato's Republic, but she's also reading Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and things like that.
Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So good. Buck, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
Yeah, I'm on a journey right now to be in have the best physical fitness, mental and physical fitness of my life. And guys like you inspire me on that. You exude fitness, and I really appreciate that. That's a ability. I feel like I'm as lean as I've been. I'm leaner now than I was when I graduated high school, but I still have a ways to go. And I think that everyone owes it to themselves to be in the best physical condition they can be, period, bar none. And to do it without the assistance. No one has a pharmaceutical deficiency. Let me just say that. So there's no need to resort to medications to achieve your fitness level, your health. So you can do this with healthy, nutritious eating and movement, hobbies, whatever you want to do to get you there, whether you like to go work out or do activity, play pickleball with friends or whatever it is. And so I'm trying to incorporate those things into my life to be in. I'm almost 60, and I feel like I can actually try to do things to keep up with my son and my sons and my daughter and my grandkids. And that's my goal, right? Because I know that I can do this land business. I can continue being successful doing whatever it is I go after, and I'll be able to. I was talking to a friend. He's a little younger than me, and he made the comment. He's very successful financially, and just made the comment. So I'm hoping that my physical ability, my body, will allow me to have a long retirement. I forget the way he characterized it, but he was concerned that his body wouldn't make go the distance, and that his retirement would run out. He's younger than me, right? That his retirement would run out. He's before his body did.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, man, that is not. Don't think that way. You just put yourself in a place where you're going to be right, doing everything you can, exercise, social, mental. Now for me, I've gotten rid of the alcohol. I don't drink. A lot of things that I've changed in my lifestyle. And so if I can do that, I feel like I can tackle anything. I can do big land subdivides. I can go meet with sellers and, you know, chew the fat with them and maybe just get a few deals done and also contribute to the community as a firefighter or whatever it is and be there for my grandkids. I was just on the phone yesterday with my two grandsons on a FaceTime, and it's really cool that they know granddad. And I want to be, and I remember I didn't get to know my grandparents, and that's too bad, right? I don't want that to be the case for me. I want to be present and in their lives. And I know that's not a land thing, but I think by having that commitment, consistency, and avoiding no drug deficiency. Never. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm not doing whatever that Ozempic is or this or that. I don't
Right.
need I don't need that stuff. I can actually focus more on controlling what I put in my body. I want to have good fuel and activities
Yeah.
and friends.
That's fantastic. That's beautiful. I love that. One last tactical question for you. You mentioned that you're a coach, you have students, and I feel like I learn as much from my students as hopefully they learn from me. And so I'm interested in hearing your approach to this, but what do you say is maybe the top two issues that people that are struggling in the land business, that newcomers to the land industry are having, that you can say, I've seen this pretty much, it's going to be some kind of iteration of one or two things if it's not quote unquote working for someone that's newer in the industry.
You we talked about buy back your time, Dan Martell, and I think I cracked the code on this more than 10 years ago, and that is, and I immediately applied that when I got into the land business, which was getting my first VA on board And even if thought that I could do it myself, I actually hired two VAs because I wasn't sure which one would work out. Only one of them worked out, and she's still with me to this day. And that really enabled me to focus on more important high value tasks. And even if it's part-time, half-time, 10 hours a week, whatever it is, and then you can scale them up as the business dictates. And it's really weird. I know if you haven't had a virtual assistant working for you, and people always wonder, well, what am I going to have them do? Or how am I going to track their time? Or how am I going to pay them? Or all these things come up. And once you crack that code and have them, it's like, how would I ever live without them? Oh my goodness. I mean, I have VAs that do my underwriting for me, the due diligence on all the properties, price the properties, post the ads to Facebook Marketplace or to land.com, run my texting campaigns for me, et cetera, et cetera. And I started with one, and I would learn how to do whatever I needed to get done, and I would record myself. And Dan talks about that in Buy Back Your Time. This is how you record a working procedure. Maybe you record yourself doing it 3 times and make your checklist from it and hand it off. It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be micro step, but it can be just high level. And if you hire a smart person, which generally you can find really smart people, or at least you can kiss a few frogs and get the one that works. The cost of doing that for, my VAs are in the Philippines, it's crazy cheap. For $350 a month, half-time, you can have somebody supporting your business. You probably spend more than that on your lattes each month. Because last time I checked, if you're in Denver, it's probably $8 for a latte with the oat milk and whatever the whip and stuff you're putting on it. Yeah, you can definitely afford it. And I think that's what I really encourage my coaching clients is that even if you think you don't need it, you want to get these people on board and spun up in advance of you thinking you need them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's not just the virtue of, oh, they're doing things so I don't have to do them. There's so many other ways that having someone on your team can help manifest in your business in terms of like decision fatigue. That's a real thing. Like focusing on only the things that will move the needle for you in your business. Thinking of those higher level things, working on your business versus in your business. All of those things are made possible by having someone to help. Right? Could you do all the things? Yeah, absolutely. You're capable of doing all the things. Should you do all the things? A little bit different of a little bit different of a
You hit it on the head, Kendall. In your background, you're thinking you might be self-sabotaging because that's extra work for you.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
don't have the person that is taking care
Absolutely.
of it.
Absolutely. No,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's a super great point. Buck, I just want to thank you so much. This has been such a
Oh, I love
pleasure.
this, man. Thank you for having me on. I
Oh
really
my
appreciate it. And
gosh.
you and I got to hang out, and that was so much fun. And I know we're going to do it again.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for giving so much to our community and just ask what types of things are you looking for right now? What connections or resources we can help you with? How can we give back to you?
I am restarting we're talking about Gritty Dads, and I have a brand that I started a few years ago, maybe 9 years ago, called Survival Dad. And I was thinking that I'd use that as a megaphone for talking about a variety of topics, including business, fatherhood, grandfatherhood, being gritty, being successful at later in life, because I'm definitely over the hill, those kinds of things. Even though I love hanging out and being with younger guys, I learn more quite often from guys that have a lot less runway under their wings than I do. And that's a lot of fun. So yeah, you can go to survivaldad.com is my work in progress. I'll be updating that. I have interviewed a few cool people, and I'll be adding to that list as we go forward. Probably will restart the podcast. I don't think I'm going to be this social media phenom or anything. I don't think I'll be Instagrammable or anything.
You never
Until I
know.
have my six pack. Once I have my six pack, that's it. I'm going to be on
Six,
Instagram every day.
yeah,
But
six packs definitely are the currency on Instagram, but
yes.
no, I think you're going to be absolutely incredible and super excited to see how that develops for you. And we'll definitely put survivaldad.com in our show notes. So if you're interested in getting more from Buck and being part of that community, please check that out. Thank you guys
Love
so
it.
much, Buck. This has
Thank
been
you,
an
everybody, for being
absolute
here and letting me
pleasure.
rant. I
Oh my
can't,
gosh.
Kendall, this was awesome, brother. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and I'm super excited to see you in a couple of months.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Happy
everybody.
early birthday. Happy early birthday, and we'll
Thanks,
chat
man.
soon. You guys take care. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye
Bye-bye.
now.
If you're interested in hearing from other 6 and 7-figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, Only Land Fans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.